I'll request your help tonight. Tried to review on the way in, but we've had a busy week this week. So on Monday morning at 5 o'clock, I got a phone call that Abby was going into labor. So we made a trip to Deer Creek and then back to Stillwater. And then I came back to Hydro for a school board meeting. She was born during the school board meeting. Drove back to Stillwater, back to Deer Creek, and back here about 15 minutes ago. So just rolling in to Hydro. But this week we're kind of in between. As I told you at the beginning, I'm just kind of the interim teacher. Josh Reed is going to take over here just in a few weeks. And so I've just kind of broken up these few weeks this summer into a few different topics. We're going to wrap up the first one and start the second one. And we might finish the second one, we might not finish the second one. But we'll get some studying done in the meantime. So wrapping up today, our topic of created for good works. And so we've been looking at ways that, first of all, to see biblically, scripturally, we are created for good works in Christ Jesus. And so we know that. So we've been looking at what that means. How can we apply that? What does it translate to in our lives that we were created for good works? And so we've been looking at different ways that we can do good works and the benefits of that, the good things that come out of that. Last week, we started by looking at doing good works among the brotherhood, doing good works in our congregation and among other churches. And then at the end of class, we got to the lesson we're going to start with this week and finish probably pretty quick. But do good deeds in the community. So doing good deeds for those that are outside of the church. And we definitely need to be doing those type of things. So we started that last week, and I think where we ended last week was I was reminding you of the example of just one example, the Central Church of Christ of Nashville is now closed, and the reputation that they had. And because of that reputation, glory was given to God. God was glorified. Many people came to them and shared the gospel, and tens of thousands of people became Christians because it started with the reputation of that church of doing good works, helping people out. When people got in a tough situation, they knew where they could go to get help, and that church gave them the help that they need. Not only helping them through that tough time, whether it might be hardship, physical, financial hardship, but they gave them the food they really needed, which was the gospel. And so because of that, so many souls were saved. And people wanted to learn about that congregation, which in turn they learned about Christ in doing so. So hopefully that is what we are and want to grow in becoming even more so. So let's look at a few verses. We're down actually to the discussion part of this lesson, but let's look at a few verses and let's have some discussion. So Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 7. Jeremiah 29, 7. Okay, and probably should have led with some context there. So if you look into your Bible at your heading, it probably tells you Jeremiah. Mine says Jeremiah's letter to the exiles. So this is where we have Israel is exiled, Nebuchadnezzar to Babylon. And so even while they were there in this very worldly place, they're instructed by God through the prophet. They're instructed to pray for the city that they are in. They are to pray for the city that they are in. And why is that? What reason is given? For in its, I think your version said peace, right? ESV says welfare. For in its welfare, ESV says you we could get into a whole very controversial discussion here about current times here in United States and in Oklahoma, and maybe even in Hydro. But we could get into that long discussion about is this God's country, is this God's state, is this God's city? But here we see an example that we are to pray for the place that we live. How many of you do that? I know I do. Pray for your country, pray for your state, pray for your city. In my situation, pray for our school. We do that publicly once a month. We do that at the school. We want to pray for the broader community to be better. I guess eventually we would hope that they would find God. If they haven't, we'd hope that they would find salvation, that they would follow Christ. But we want to pray for the welfare of the place that we live. It makes things better for us in many ways. Here it talks about with Tammy, her version. What version was that, Tammy?
New King James.
Okay, so New King James says, in its peace, in that city's peace, you'll find your peace. That makes sense. If we live in a peaceful place at a peaceful time, it brings peace to us, right? Here in ESV, it talks about the welfare. So that's the word that it uses. Pray for the welfare of the city, and it will bring your welfare. That's what the ESV says. And so, yeah, we are to do good works, do good deeds. In this case, the deed is the prayer specifically. But we are to be praying. We are to be mindful of. We are to want better for our city, our state, our country. That's a biblical thing that we should do. I think in some ways it makes spreading the gospel easier. In some ways, if we get deep into it, it actually makes it a little more challenging sometimes when things are nice and calm and peaceful and comfortable. Sometimes it does make it challenging. But if we had experienced the opposite of that, I think we would understand we want peace and welfare in our city, state, country. Okay, Proverbs chapter 14, verse 34. It's 14. Proverbs 14, 34.
Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people.
Okay, so here again, along the same type of thinking here that here it says righteousness exalts a nation. So we need to spread righteousness, and that improves our nation. It lifts our nation up. And then the opposite of that, sinfulness, sin, is a reproach to the people or to the nation. And so, yes, we need to be mindful of, yes, we need to be doing good deeds within our communities. That means, here, the question is, that follows that, what influence will our good works have on our cities and nations? So if we do good works among our cities, our nations, the places that we live, what influence might that have?
It might influence others to be the same way.
Yeah. Sometimes you come across people who initially, when you do and say things and act in a way that we should as Christians, it might turn them off a little bit. But for the most part, people are intrigued by it. Especially, I will say, especially in these times. I think when we see, even if you look beyond the church, look at other religious groups, when you see people who are doing good works, they really stand out. They really stand out, and people start asking questions. Why would you do that?
And it doesn't even have to be a big thing. My washer and dryer was plugged, so I had to go to the laundromat in South Florida. I was there last month. And the lady and her husband came in and I said, hey, there's 3 washers here that you can have. And she said, and I visited with her a little bit, she said, if I owned a business, I would hire you to manage it, and I would never let you go. And it was just off
the stress and the worries and concern that always go along with that. Okay, who were they going to find? And we knew Justin was a good guy, but then it was pretty evident. But then whenever he was telling me, and I shared with Jessica, when you become a firefighter, which he's a full-time firefighter, there's like a brotherhood there. There really is. I mean, they are close. They have to be, and I'm glad they are, because they depend on one another for their lives. But they started calling him preacher because he doesn't cuss. He's one of the few. They notice. So
I think they asked him why he didn't, and that what it is though too. They just called. After that, they called him preacher because he said, "Well, I just don't think it reflects the life of Christ or something." I can't remember exactly what he said, but something to that effect. And then they sort of, and he just laughs and they call him.
So yes, great simple thing. Let's look at 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 7. 1 Timothy 3:7.
You want it read or?
Yes.
He must also have a good reputation with outsiders, so that he will not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap.
Okay, so these next two verses we're going to look at, this one and the next one, let's keep in mind, we're talking about specific people. So in this case, this is talking about elders. So it's talking about the qualifications for an elder, the things that an elder needs to have in their life, the things that they need to demonstrate in their lives. But as we look at these, as has often been said, when we look at these qualifications for elders, those things are good for any of us. Those are good standards for any of us to follow and try to demonstrate in our lives. But this one is the one we're going to focus on tonight. And it says that we're the elders, and so I think you would agree by what we've studied this summer, that we all need to be thought of by outsiders, thought well of by outsiders, so that we don't fall into this disgrace and the snare of the devil. And so when we go about doing good works, we go about doing good deeds in our daily lives, then that will lead, hopefully, it will lead most people, most people will think well of you, just like they are to think well of these elders. As a Christian, we need to try to live up to that too. All of us do. Men, we need to try to live up to this so that we can someday, it's becoming, I know you know it, it's no secret, I mean, we see it here. It's becoming harder and harder to find elders within the brotherhood. We need to do our parts. We need to be doing our part to try to build up and to live out these qualifications. We need to be teaching them to our younger men that this is the goal. This should be your aspiration. And so the one here that we're looking at tonight, though, is that we must be well thought of by outsiders. One thing that I haven't mentioned, and I think that we do need to mention, at least I'm going to mention it out loud because I need to hear it myself, is so all of these things that we're looking at, they have to do with interacting with the community. There are so many times in life, and Cody, I know after a few days you're going to think this, that I would love just to move away to the mountains and not to deal with people. Sounds nice, right? As a Christian, that's really not an option. I need to not think that, because as a Christian, we're to interact with people. Like, we're to be out there. We're to be interacting with them. We have to, for them to think well of us. We have to be doing the good works. We have to be spreading the gospel. We can't just be a hermit. I would love to be a hermit.
Can't put the light under a bulb.
That's right. That's right. Good point. But here, make it a goal to be well thought of by outsiders. I told Jessica as we were driving, I'm like, I feel like I keep repeating things over and over the last 5 or 6 weeks, so I'm going to continue doing that. So with this, to be now I lost my train of thought because I'm not going to say that because I've been saying it over and over and I'll come back to it. I forget. I lost my thought. And then I'll say it over and over. Okay, let's go ahead and skip over to 1 Timothy 5:10. And so this is talking about widows and dealing with widows. And so let's go ahead and read verses 9 and 10. If somebody would, 1 Timothy 5, 9 and 10.
No widow may be put on the list of widows unless she is over 60, has been faithful to her husband, and is well known for her good deeds, such as bringing up children, showing hospitality, washing the feet of the Lord's people, helping those in trouble, and devoting herself to all kinds of good deeds.
Okay, so here, talking about the widows, so we'll say women, but men, we could go along with this whole thought here as well. Having a reputation of good works. The thought that left me earlier was, we have to remember, I'll remind you, every one of you in here, when you walk out this door, when you go to work tomorrow, or go wherever you go tomorrow, go uptown, through your daily activities, especially here in Hydro. A lot of us don't live in Hydro, but especially when you're here in Hydro, people know that you go to church here. You are representing the church and Christ wherever you go. Our reputation is important. Your reputation is important. What you do, what I do, whenever I leave this building, it's a reflection on the church. It is. So, and I will tell you that from experience. That is not something that I'm just saying or I read in a book. That is from experience. I know it reflects on the church. Good and bad. Those of you, which is most of you, who have been part of this congregation or any congregation, especially a small town, I would say, for very long, you know that too. We're not going to get into sharing all of our experiences that we've had, but I'll just give you the categories. I've had experiences as a community member, still a member of this community. I haven't got up to status to be a member of the Weatherford community yet. I'm still a member of the Hydro community, as far as I'm concerned. So, in this community, I've had experiences where somebody in the church has done something that isn't so great. We all do from time to time. We all mess up. And it reflects upon the church. Somebody might approach me because that was my brother or sister. I didn't make them do it. But your reputation reflects upon the church. The other is true too, though, which is good. When you do good things, people know that you go to church here. That's a great thing to happen. And I have had that happen many times. People know. People know. Oh, isn't that person in Church of Christ? You go to Church of Christ. They know. And so we need to not forget that, though, whenever we leave here, whenever we leave this building. We can't forget that. The things that we do or say that we really shouldn't, it's going to reflect upon the church. Things that we do and say that are living a life for Christ, that's going to reflect upon the church. That's good.
When we should look at it, though, it's like if we reflect Christ, yeah, the community and everything, but we're actually, being, the body of Christ. We reflect Christ. If you don't reflect it well, and reflect that, it tends to make him look, a certain way. To people that don't, have a close relationship with him.
That's the important piece right there. To people who don't have a close relationship with him. Should that
They don't
be
know
the,
any better.
Yeah, should it be the case? We should know everybody messes up. We should know that. And it should not be a hindrance to somebody's feelings about the church. But it is. It just is. We know it is. It shouldn't be. Somebody shouldn't think, well, I saw Jeremy Bussey and he was doing this, so I'll never go to Church of Christ. They shouldn't think that, because this church is made up of human beings. But they do. They do. Yeah. So hopefully we don't become a hindrance to them having a relationship, knowing Christ, putting him on back in baptism. So the question that I just skipped over concerning the home commentary, let me read it. It says, with time and humility, Christians will build a reputation for good works. Why is this important? Why is this important?
Because, I mean, we're supposed to build each other up, and, I mean, in the church and, you know, out, I mean, we're supposed to not have any, negative things come out of our mouth. I mean, we're supposed to be positive, and everything that we speak is supposed to be, what is that verse? It's supposed to be, not pleasing, but,
For edification?
helpful, huh?
For edification? Yeah, helpful.
Helpful,
Yeah.
and, there's a verse, it's in my head, but I can't say it, but yeah, so I mean, that's what I was getting at that. It's not an overnight deal either. It's like, the good deeds, you know, it's just a habitual, everyday thing, you know? Like, you can't not cuss for a week and then 2 days, just let it all out there, and then, you know, off for a week, you know what I mean? It's gotta be a very consistent, deal, you know? So the length, you know, you're staying firm in it, you're not, yeah, you know what I mean?
Yes. Yep. Habits are hard to break, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah. Just try not to let those bad things become habits, because they are hard to break. One guy I listen to every once in a while on a podcast. I do other things besides listen to podcasts, but I will try not to let that. He says that he's a habitual habit breaker. And that's, yeah, so that sometimes I feel that way.
That's a heck of a
So many habits to break. I'm just an habitual habit breaker. So some things I wrote down related to the things that we've discussed so far tonight. For myself, I always just write down stuff for myself, just to kind of give you an idea of where I'm coming from, so you can make a personal application to your life. One thing I want to ask myself these questions about how I presenting myself in the community. The first one I put down is people think. What do they think? So do they think he has been blessed and he's passing those blessings to others? I hope that they think that. I hope that they see that I realize that I have been blessed in many areas. I realize that I have lived a very blessed life. And so do I pass that on to others? Do I pass those blessings on to others? Hopefully, I've seen that way. Hopefully, I have that reputation. That would be my goal as a Christian, doing good works in the community. What do others see as my priorities, my passions, my allegiances? Hopefully, they would see that. And for me, I always try to evaluate that, because I look at, if you just evaluate it based on time, everybody in here can guess what my number one priority would be.
School.
Yeah, that's what everybody would say. The kids at school, the little ones, they always say, Mr. Bussey, do you live here? I guess kind of, yeah, kind of. And so, hopefully, though, it's not just about the time. Hopefully they see that is not, it is very important to me, obviously, because I do give a lot of time for that, but it is not my number one priority at all. It's down the list, but unfortunately it takes a lot of time. In my passions, so what do I get the most fired up about? Hopefully it's not basketball. What's that? Podcast? Yes.
Grandkids.
Grandkids, yeah, that's not a bad thing. I hope not. Tell me it's not a bad thing. But within that, yes, within that, Kathy, you have to have the right frame of mind too. I mean, with us and being new grandparents, although, man, can y'all believe this? We went from 0 to 5, like that.
It happens.
Yeah, it happens quickly. And so with that, we have, and help us with that, we have been very focused on Jesus, 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 Jesus. I mean, just talking to them all the time about Jesus. And because we want them, they have no choice. They're going to know him. Well, they get to choose later what they want to do. But there's no choice. They're going to know that Nanny and Papa talk about Jesus and love Jesus. And then allegiances. Where are my allegiances? You know, in life, it just happens as an adult. There are points in your life, sometimes it happens a lot. You have to choose. You have to make a decision on what am I going to follow? Who am I going to support? What am I going to support? Where does my allegiance lie? And what do people in the community, how do they feel about that? Do they know where my allegiance lies? And I hope so. I hope based upon the things that I'm doing in the community, I hope that they know that. Another one that I wrote down, last one I wrote down, and then I expect to hear some from y'all to do a confessional up here. As I can read my handwriting, do I act with compassion and grace, knowing that I am a recipient of abundant grace? I hope so. I don't always. I will tell you, so I wrote this down. I don't always. Should I? Yes. I hope that's my overall reputation that I do. Hope my deeds in the community show that. That ultimately what it comes down to is that I realize the abundant amount of grace that's given to me. That I act that way with extending that compassion and grace to those I interact with on a daily basis and the things that I do for them and with them. What about y'all?
I have to give myself pep talks so many times when I get those pharmacy calls after hours.
Yes.
It's hard to not get irritated. I have to tell myself, it was my grandma, I was going to do it for them, and so I just.
And in your case, I mean, not all the time, sometimes it's that way with me. I have to remind myself, okay, if I don't, who will?
Yeah.
Nobody. So
Someone
like that,
else
that's
sit
your
there with
case.
pneumonia and then you
Yeah.
don't have But it gets old when you sit down to supper and it starts ringing.
Yes. They time it well, don't they?
Yes.
It's like whenever you pick up the phone, you're like,
Yeah.
My kids actually make fun of me because I'll see who's calling and, you know, and as soon as I answer the phone, it's like a different person than what I just saw reacting to the phone ringing.
And sometimes we have to be there, and sometimes we do. Hopefully we don't stay there, but sometimes we have to be there where we have to work on putting that face forward. And then when it's over with, we have to work on that and pray about it. But hopefully, more so, we're in a good place where it's just genuine.
right.
Yeah, it's just genuine. It's just the reaction. We don't have to work on putting a boring face.
I actually had to talk to my kids about it. It's been a while back, but they were like, oh, why are they calling you? Why can't they just not call you? And all this, and I'm like, that's me. That's me. There's acting when
Yes.
I act, and so then I have to be like, I do get irritated, but, you know, we had a whole conversation about pain medicine.
Yeah, it's a great learning opportunity.
Yeah, so.
Kind of had that talk with road rage.
Yeah, there you go.
Like, I was driving around and then all of a sudden the boys in the back, why are they doing that? Don't they know? Hold on, boys. Don't they know they shouldn't turn there? Don't they know they shouldn't? Because I'm always critiquing everybody around me, you shouldn't be doing this. And now they're always going, don't they know Daddy? No, they don't. They didn't have me in their car teaching them.
Yeah.
I don't even think you know this because I haven't seen you. But anyway, I was in Stillwater with Lily, and I was driving 15 million times to the hospital by myself. Someone honked at me, so I'm sure I was either doing something illegal or was going super slow because I didn't know where I was going. It was dark. And Willie goes, they don't have to be a jerk about it. And I said, you're right, but I don't know who told you that. And so then I said, well, now, Willie, what do you use your horn for? And he said, well, Mama says that I use my horn for danger. I said, yes. Not just because you're irritated that person's going slow. No, that's true. But I just want to explain kids.
I'm sure you've heard the stories. Yes, I listen to podcasts, I also listen to sermons that are not podcasts, technically. But yeah, I've heard several through the years. One was a preacher who was confessing himself that it just was a reaction, and he experienced some road rage in the church van that said Church of Christ on the side. And then another one was what had happened. Same, remember it says Church of Christ. Except the one that's peeling, they'll be like, oh, he must have bought that from the Church of Christ.
Hey, we can make it happen.
And then I've heard stories too, preachers. There was one, I can't remember who the preacher was, but he was talking about he was on the recipient end of road rage by someone who had the fish on the bumper sticker.
Oh.
So yeah, we have to remember that.
Hey, I got a funny story. It'll only take a second. So whenever I first started, looking for churches and, because of what God did for me, you know what I mean? These kids, right? I had this little piece of junk car, and these kids had come up to me, they had these stickers, right? These bumper stickers, and they said, Jesus is Lord, turn or burn on them. That's what the sticker said, turn or burn. Like, very, you know what I'm saying? Hey, you know what I'm saying? And they had like 20 of them, right? And they're like, Mark Green told us to put these on their cars. I'm like, well, it says Jesus is Lord, turn or burn, bro. You got to be in it. You got to be in it, bro. That's a full force, And I said, go ahead, bam, tap that sucker up, man. And they did. They slapped them all over the car. I mean, all over my hood, the sides, the top. They had Jesus is Lord, turn or burn all over that car. And I loved it.
It keeps you accountable, right?
Yeah, it does, Like, hey, why is he doing 100? And at 55 with Jesus is Lord on there.
Watch that car's going to burst into flames.
Yeah. I mean, it's in the impound yard now, but. Yeah. Go for it. Jesus is a go.
What are those lights?
Yeah.
Why is it important?
Yeah. Crazy stories out
It's
there.
important to help other people, because I feel like we help ourselves. People need to know that we're not cold, that we're not just about inside the building. And that happens a lot. Our neighbors, I've said several times, we're in an ultimate relationship, ultimate lifestyle. And I told Sandra, I said, we've got to help them. If they need help, it doesn't matter. There's all kinds of people out there that need the Lord. And sometimes our good behavior is going to make them ask questions. Why are you so nice to us? Because Jesus was so nice to me. I think it's opening up. Lets people know, oh, those Church of Christers aren't as cold as I thought they would be. They really are nice. They're real people. Maybe they really do believe in Jesus. And I think that's the main reason why we should go out of our way, if we, try to help others, somebody else, let them see us. Not always, I know because God rewards those secretive things, but we're not doing it for the reward. We're doing it because we first were saved and now. Like I used to tell people, if I got something for free given to me, I'm going to hand it out for free too. If I got people would give me free shoes or a free whatever, I'm going to turn around and give that thing back and say, oh, it's free to me. Salvation was free to me, and the kindness of Jesus was free. I'm not going to charge you for being nice to you.
Hopefully it
passed by me, and he was the only one that stopped and said that I had a good hairdo, or, you know, he liked my shirt, or whatever, you know what I mean? It could just be a kind gesture that, you know, introduces them to the love of Christ. I mean, it could be something as simple as that.
Well, and I'm not saying, and I know you're not saying, we're not going to put on a rainbow shirt and jump in a pride parade.
Correct.
But
Thank God.
was it this summer that on the news there was a pride parade? But the story out of the news was the church, that it was very hot, it's a heat wave, they brought cold water to them. That was the story. It wasn't the pride parade. They lost their story. The story was these people, because it was so hot and there were actually people passing out, they were having first responders come, they brought water to them. It was very confusing to people because they openly disagreed with that lifestyle. But they gave them water because they were thirsty.
I think it's important to remember, I mean, we have a family member like that. And, I mean, why would I treat them any differently than I would treat your other aunt? I mean, like, if I'm gonna show up to one, I mean, why am I not gonna show up to the other? And they know I don't agree with them, but it just, to me, it's always a reflection of me. If I am so offended by their sin, that's different than my sin, because I sin differently than they sin.
You know, a few years ago, when Chuck was still alive, he used to say people wanted a handout to find me. And I usually would help them. And there was a couple, or a family at a Walmart in Yukon. And he was outside with a sign, you know, need help. And I said, okay, what do you need? He said, I said, you need some groceries? He said, well, my wife's inside with another lady getting us some food. Okay, do you need gas? What do you need? And when she came out, when they came out of the store, the lady that was with her husband walked up. And he was a Church of Christ minister. And I said, that's interesting because I belong to that time Rutherford Church of Christ. I find it interesting, the only two people starving to help are members of the church.
People didn't get it.
I ended up paying for hotel rooms, but they needed it, so that was okay. It was hot, they needed air conditioning and for their kids, so I didn't care about it.
I've been there. I mean, not there, well, yeah.
Nursing it.
Yeah.
And now.
Yeah, we all have.
Being an example to the youngers too, now that you're telling us our stories, encouraging those of us who are gonna be in a similar situation. Well, I remember when Linda did that, I think that's something I can do too. So it's helpful that we're talking, I think, about this.
And like I said, we've all been there. I mean, Jessica and I would, I don't know, we had been married too long, and we had to get an Altus or something, doctor's appointment.
Lori Walk, they know who that is.
Yes.
She didn't know who we were. Though.
So it was Sarah. I
Yes, she
believe.
had to have surgery.
That was a long time
It
ago.
wasn't that.
So we were in Altus in an older car, and our car broke down like a bell broke. Now, for some of you won't understand what this means, but there were no cell phones. Like, they didn't exist. Like, there was the big bad things, but we didn't have that.
We had to walk.
So we were like, what do we do? I mean, we're in Altus, Oklahoma.
She was 2 months old.
We know no one, and we have a baby, and Altus, Oklahoma is always like Death Valley. I mean, it's so hot down there. And so it was hot. And so we're like, what do we do? And they were like, yeah, it was during daytime. We'll just go by the Church of Christ and just see if anybody will answer the door. And Lori Wall was there. And,
No, she was at the
Oh, not
island.
Lori Wall. It was somebody that we ended up knowing later.
But she was the receptionist at the island
Yes.
and came over
Yes.
to help us that time.
But we got help from the church.
Yes.
Yes. And so then we were able to use the phone, make phone calls, and let us stay in the cool building. And so, yeah, we knew where to go. And so hopefully that's the we can develop. People know where to go to get help.
Were you members of the Church of Christ?
Yes. Yeah. But we knew we could do it, and somebody would help us.
And I just tank blows up, this place.
All right.
A few weeks ago, a guy called me from Clinton that had worked briefly at the museum while I was on the board there. And he said, Linda, you know, I had to quit because my mom needed help. She needed to go for cancer treatment, and I was trying to drive her back and forth. And he said, I'm still trying to do that, but now I have cancer, and I need someone to drive me back and forth. Do you know anybody that can help? And I said, well, do you go to church any place? And he said, well, when I was younger, I went to the Church of Christ in Clinton. He said, do you know Pat Peters? And I said, well, I know who he is. And he said, well, he's retired there, and I don't know who the minister is now. And I said, well, call them. So I waited a few days, and I called over to the church, and I said, did y'all get a call from this gentleman? And she said, no. And I told her what it was about. She said, give me his phone number, we'll call him. And we'll get in touch with him, and we'll see if he needs rides, we'll see whatever he can do. And I said, also give me the number for the VA, if he was ever in the military, the VA will, in Clinton will help him also. But, I mean, the secretary was just like, we'll jump on it, we'll get a hold of him, and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah. When you're doing good deeds, those opportunities come along, and they happen. I'll give you 2 quick stories while the kids are coming in, just because there's 2 more relevant stories, and I want to share them. So one of them, I don't remember all the details, it just happened a few weeks ago, but we went to church with my parents, and my brothers also attend there. And there was this guy that my middle brother was late to lunch, and I'm like, we were wondering where he was at. Well, there's this guy that's a cross-country trucker, and, you know, you can't just park a truck anywhere in a town. He said he goes to Church of Christ, every Sunday, and he always has a ride. That Sunday, my brother just happened to have me the ride. And he says, I always get a ride. I just park wherever I park, truck stop, whatever. I always get a ride, every Sunday. And he said, when I signed up with this company, he said, that's what I told him. I'll stop him every Sunday to go to church. And he does. And then, I was right once not, the other story left me. Several years ago, many years ago, we were in the old building. Some of you may remember this. It was many years ago, though. But this guy, Wednesday night, he walks in, like, he would have been the one that I would have had to stay outside right now and talk to him for a little bit and kind of interview him and maybe pat him down, I don't know. So he was dressed in, like, raggedy clothes. He was really dirty. I can't smell. He was probably smelly. And he came and he sat on the back row at church. And then, as soon as church was out, I went straight towards him and started talking to him. He was actually a normal guy. Well, come to find out, he was a young guy. You know, he's finding himself in his way in life. He was a young guy in his 20s. And he just decided he went to work at a shipyard somewhere on the Gulf Coast. And he lived very modestly, saved his money up until he had money saved up to walk across the United States. And his goal was he wanted to see what churches of Christ were like across the United States. And so he always had a place to stay. Well, sometimes he actually stayed in his tent. But so the way it worked, he stayed at our house that night. You know, like, you're crazy. He stayed at our house that night. So he got a shower, got a warm meal, just an enchiladas. I remember that. He got to eat those. Thought they were amazing. And then I called my parents. I'm like, how far do you think you'll make it? And he's like, probably about the state line. For tomorrow, I said, I got you a place to stay. So he stayed with my parents that night. They got him a place the next night. And then I looked him up, and yeah, he kept a blog the whole time. And so we were in it. And it was like, he stayed, went to this Church of Christ, stayed with this Christian family, and just all the way across the United States. He did that. But he knew people would help him in the church. And he has some wild stories, as you can imagine, going across the country. All right, thank you for your comments. And so next week, just to prepare you, so you get your guard up, we're going to be looking at lesson